So a very warm welcome to everyone to this Sangha Live session today. And yeah, I really hope you're settling in well and feeling good about being here in this session. As always, it's really lovely to see the warm welcomes and the kind words in the chat. It really creates a very beautiful sense of kind of sacred place that we are developing here together. And yeah, it brings a supportive sense of community, which is, as has been often reflected by wise beings, a really core part of our practice together. So if you haven't already, you really feel invited to put your words, your welcomes, your expressions into the chat here, and I'm sure you'll be met in return with a lot of warmth and kindness. So my name's Nathan. I'm guiding the sessions this week, and hopefully you were able to be here yesterday. And if not, don't worry. Things that we're saying today will be extensions of that, but also they can stand alone. They'll make sense within themselves, if they make any sense at all, of course. So the sessions here are going to be a short reflection from me on the content of this theme, and then we'll have a half hour or so of meditation, bringing some of those ideas into practice. And then we'll have a period of time where we can open out to any questions or reflections from yourself. And maybe I'll say a little bit more about how we'll do the questions part at that time, but really at the moment we just have the chat, so using the chat for now for welcoming, for arriving, and any technical issues and things like that, we can also use the chat. But it's also going to become the question placement location, which is quite convenient in a way. It's just one stream, but to make them stand out, we use kind of capital letters question at the beginning, and yeah, that'll help us to be able to pick those out. If you do have any technological problems, then Faith is here very kindly, looking out for us all and letting us know, how it's all going. I heard yesterday that my voice and my lips and my words were not syncing up with each other. So we're trying a slightly different way of me coming in today, and I hope that will resolve it. And if it won't, then I'll try something more dramatic. So the theme this week is to be honest, and it's been expressed as really one of the very core and important aspects of our path. And when we are honest and we are regarding ourselves, then it's quite important for us that we don't kind of fall into blaming and shaming and that kind of pattern. If we're honest about things that we experience and we see them as shortcomings, then it's really helpful that we don't use that as a way of hurting ourselves or of hurting others. So in short, we could say it's really helpful to hold the view, don't believe everything you think. Yeah. Understand that it has potential for being harmful at times, but also we can gently kind of question a sense of certainty that we may develop in our lives. Haven't got my cup here anymore, but oftentimes we might think to get going in the day, I need that kind of shot of caffeine. I need my tea or my coffee first thing in the morning. And, and we can just think, yeah, it really works. As soon as it touches my lips, I start to feel myself waking up. I feel myself, um, coming into being more. And I've had those rituals. I often have a cup of tea or a cup of coffee in the morning, and it can seem like that's actually what's waking me up. At one point, I was listening to a sleep expert called Matthew Walker, and he was noting it's actually the warmth in the drink that's doing that work. And those of us who may be challenged around sleep and waking and all of these kinds of things, it's actually quite an important feature of sleep and wakefulness is the temperature of the core of the body. And we can influence that obviously by what we drink. So it's quite interesting in that way. But also he just made a very clear point, which is that it takes about 10 minutes for caffeine to be assimilated into the system. If you feel enlivened by the first few sips in the first minute, it's not the caffeine that's doing that. But it's actually that change of the core body strength, which actually means the healthier and easier option for us is maybe just to drink a glass of hot water. And, that kind of changes our rhythm. Yeah. And when we're honest about that, it's actually, I know I want the milky, fatty, creamy coffee taste stuff. It's not for the waking up. It's actually, I'm feeding something else. Right. So don't believe everything that we think, and don't believe every action that we do is actually doing the thing that it's doing. Which is to say, a little healthy doubt is really helpful on this journey into honesty. And if we get to a point where we're saying, I don't know, that can feel like a failing. And yet, it's really essential for us to be able to hold that position, right? Hold that position. But I also want to note this isn't the goal. The goal isn't, I don't know. And it's not that we can't know anything or do anything. So I don't know, it needn't be a conclusion, right? Needn't be a conclusion, and we'll come back around to a little bit more in tune with that. So I don't know. I don't know if it's this, I don't know if it's that, but I'm going to try things. I'm going to explore. So don't believe everything you think. Don't also believe everything you think about thoughts, what thoughts are, who's having them, who's making them. And we can hold a view in meditation that thoughts are just happening. Not something we do, not something we own, not something we should identify ourselves with rigidly, yeah? But actually something we attend to. And there's an incredibly radical element in the Buddha's teachings, and I'm afraid I don't know if this was invented by the Buddha or this was just how things were talked about at their time when they were teaching, when they were sharing these things. But we have the 5 physical senses, of the nose, ears, mouth, tactile skin, being able to sense the world this way. They would also say there is a 6th sense door of the intellect that imagines, that feels, that thinks, and it creates sense objects, which we then experience. So we don't say, the ear is making these sounds, right? We say that the ear is receiving these sounds. And what we also then say is the intellect, is knowing thought forms. Whose thought forms? That doesn't matter. The Buddha would say, it doesn't matter. Treat thoughts like smells and sounds. And in a sense, they're just happening. They're just happening. They're happening due to causes and conditions, but you don't need to work out all of that. What matters most for us is, just a sense that self identity is added on. I am thinking. It feels like that, but maybe it's not so personal, if we're honest. Not really something we do. Not really something we control. We know that because I'm not waking up today with the intention to having any, ill will thoughts or greediness thoughts. I'm really perhaps very clearly intending to have good and wholesome thinking, but can't decide that because you don't decide all of your thoughts. And again, to be clear, it's not to say there's nothing you can do, but it's to say you're not in control, you're not in charge, don't have that identity too clenched. Yeah, I shouldn't be thinking this, not at my state. This isn't good. I don't want this. Good clarity in there. Draw that out without the identification. And what that means is, what's going on with these thoughts? How do we decide whether to keep this thought, follow it through, or release it? Right? And when we're starting out in meditation, and some of you may feel like you're starting out in meditation, and we might just say, just let go of the thoughts and come back to what's here, what's present, what's physical. But it is just a sense door. And in these teachings, at a certain point, we're going to need to interact with thinking. Otherwise, our meditation practice isn't going to meet the rest of our life, which involves a reasonable amount of thinking. So we need to get to know the underlying intentions, or our idea of the underlying intentions in the thinking. And so we need to have a good, skillful thought, a good, skillful question, rather, to kind of bring towards the thought. And that skillful question, I learned it from Ajahn Sucitto, and he uses, what is the mood of this thinking? And that is really skillful because it takes us out of the self-identity view and actually to be able to interact very skillfully with our thinking, right? Getting to know that inner, that outer dialogue with honesty, but also with humility, yeah, but also with a little less self-identity. How is it to think of others, instead of oneself, and think, oh yeah, that's a nicer way of thinking? How is it to think of generosity rather than greediness, and see, oh yeah, that has a different mood, and it's better for me, and it's probably going to be better for others? How is it to have thoughts of kindness rather than thoughts of unkindness, harmfulness, rejection? And all of this is because it's useful for us. So we just honestly appraise, these thoughts are happening. My thoughts, it isn't needed to be mine. I was also reflecting on a different text that Ajahn Sucitto was writing about this quality of honesty. And he was mentioning how, he's very clear that he's a renunciate, he's monk in robes, he's a celibate, he's not engaging in sexual things, but still gets lustful thoughts. Now, what does that mean? Well, he's really clear about this, but still gets those thoughts. So that honesty and that humility, thoughts happen. It means we're not in control, but it doesn't mean we're powerless. Yeah. Peace lovers get angry thoughts. What does that mean? Are they not dedicated to peacefulness? It means be honest, but remember we have choices. Yeah. Remember we have choices. You don't need to listen to those voices that occur inside us through this thinking. And you don't need to identify with that. And we can start with that honesty, with that humility, and with that creativity to support the kinds of thinking which support the kind of direction that we feel is of value in our life. And let go of those that don't. When you don't rethink a thought, it completely disappears. This is quite amazing, quite radical. So let's bring this into a meditation and see how things unfold from there. So let's invite you to get to a posture that feels supportive. And we'll begin with just stretching out, opening out our awareness so we can soften, we can ease, we can arrive fully here. So if the body field is accessible to you, I invite you to open out into the whole body, letting the awareness follow the attention down to the base of the feet, up the back of the body, top of the head, right to the fingertips. There's a whole body here. And for some of us, of course, being with the body is not the most comfortable space. And if there's some way of connecting, feel free to do that. And, feel free, of course, to go into the other sense doors like the sounds. Same way, we're opening out, being less narrowed. That's going to be helpful in this practice. Let's take a few moments just connecting with either the breath or the sounds or body sensations, just picking one, and allowing our sensitivity to receive, as if we're receiving the sounds, the breath, the body sensations. Don't need to go out and seek them, with a sense of keeping the attention, the awareness quite wide. And like we did yesterday, we do kind of 3 breaths and then rest. Which gives us time to soften the shoulders, soften the belly, soften the face, but not lose our, whatever we might call our alignment, our uprightness, our nobility that we can adopt into a posture, showing up. And then another 3 breaths, just following that rhythm yourself in your own way. And that sense of the space of awareness, or how much the body, the space around the body, or the wider field of sounds is available, it will shrink. It's interesting to notice that attention shrinks. And we can also invite it to expand. That might be stretching it out, might be just listening wider, might be just allowing it to expand. Whichever of those makes the most sense to you, feel free to explore, to experiment. And also to notice how it feels to do that. And when that feels reasonably established, you can continue establishing it if you wish, but also we can just have 3 breaths or the equivalent in other sense stores. The familiar pattern of meditation many of us will know is that when we notice thinking, we call that distraction, and we let go of it and guide the attention to the meditative object. In this practice session, we're going to be thankful for any thinking because it's going to give us an insight into the mood of our being at this time, of the direction of our travel in life. And where are we heading towards? Towards more greediness, more aversiveness, more self-delusion, fantasy, planning. But what's the mood of that? Is the mood, nothing's good enough? Is the mood so frustrating? Is the mood, this is boring, get me out of here? And if the language of mood doesn't really land in your sense of things, good to ask yourself, what's the correlate body sensation, the feeling that comes with that? Finding it in the body and allowing more space around that. So again, you're just opening out that space. And if it's a mood, we can feel, we can sense, allowing more space around that. So we're not allowing the thinking, we're allowing the mood to have more space around it. And I think you'll notice things will change when we open the space. So grounding in the breathing, listening practice. And when we notice, there's some thinking, noticing more the mood, letting go of the identification, noticing more the feeling in the body, and inviting a sense of creativity with spaciousness in particular. What's the mood of thinking right now? Noticing the feeling of the thinking that's occurring now. Noticing it's just happening. Can we take that as a view? It doesn't have to be true. It's useful. This is just happening. What would be the impact of more space, including the space behind you, above you, front, out to the sides? It might soothe, it might calm the activity in the intellect. How is it to see thoughts in the same way as we might see sounds, without that identification added on? What is a thought? Some kind of vibration, some kind of frequency, quite short-lived. And when it's gone, it's gone. And like a sound that's gone, we can recall it, think about it, turn it over in the mind. But of course, equally, we can just let them all go. They're allowed to be here, allowed to appear, and allowed to disappear. And particularly when the awareness feels spacious, feels that capacity to allow the passing through in kindness, becomes easier. And each time we practice in this way, we're offering ourselves an upgrade from making it all about me, this self, this thought. Should I, shouldn't I? Turn it into what's the mood? What's the feeling? What's the direction? Is this good? Helpful? The right thing to bring attention to? Or should I instead think of others, other beings? If there's greediness, can I take that same material but direct it towards generosity? Who could I give this to? Or gratitude, how much I have to appreciate, even if all I had was this breath, these ears that can hear however well they can, this body that can sense however well it can. Could that be enough? Using our skills to guide the mind away from reactivity, from rejection, from atmospheres that cause harm, towards kindness and considerateness to the other 8 billion humans we live with and the countless other beings of this world. May our practice be for them, opening the space, meeting the mood, letting go of what doesn't serve us, and allowing to grow what does, what leads towards freedom, towards love, towards peace, towards harmony. For the last time in this session, just noticing the activity of the intellect, the thoughts and emotions that are passing through. Can there be the honesty of recognizing what we recognize? And also the humility of knowing that we didn't do all of this by ourselves. And taking the position of potency, deciding if that's something I want more of, or it's something I'm ready to let go of. Thank you for your practice of peace and kindness. And we'll begin transitioning from this posture, this shape, this practice into being together. So I hope that this practice is an enjoyable one, a supportive one for you, and that's very much the spirit in which it's offered, to be useful, to give us more. What would we say? Getting stuck on the word, the one that's kind of stuck at the front of the queue doesn't feel quite right. But let's say more variations in our practice that we can have. And of course, at times it's going to be helpful just to say, there is thinking, let go of the thinking, come back to the practice of being here now in this way. But just to be clear, that the Buddha made a clear distinction between sorts of thinking. And there are those sorts of thinking which are tied up with greediness, with aversiveness, with harmfulness. They will occur because thoughts occur, and they don't say anything particular about you. Maybe they say something particular about us as a species or us as a culture. And we'll touch on this a little bit later on in the week, actually, about awakening our culture. But we are part of the culture, which means there's an inflow of influence from the culture, but hopefully there's also an outflow through our speech and our deeds, and also our thoughts are part of that. And that distinction that was made by the Buddha was, there's this thought that leads to Dukkhaville. It takes us down, and we know that journey. And there are these thoughts that get thought maybe less often, or encouraged, or kind of stick to us as a story. We can also see, as in the entertainment culture, they're the stories we really like, and the stories of generosity, the stories of kindness, the stories of inner clarity and compassion, the wisdom, all of that. And thoughts that are leading there are supportive. We would be foolish to kind of cut off the food stream of healthy and wholesome thinking, and just say, oh, it's all just thinking. It's like, well, these thoughts were going over there, and these thoughts were going over there. They're not the same thing. They don't have the same mood. They don't have the same direction. And that clarity can be really helpful. Otherwise, maybe we're throwing out the baby in the bathwater, neither of which we should probably be doing. Yeah, reusing that bathwater and taking care of the baby. And one of the ways that we can take care of a baby is taking care of Sangha Live, taking care of these kinds of platforms, taking care of these teachings, taking care of them through practicing them. And one of the ways that we can practice is actually taking up the opportunities to encourage the thinking around generosity. And the whole idea around generosity is, we can always keep mentioning things that the Buddha wisely said about it. But he would actually say, do think about generosity. Yeah, do think about it and enjoy it. Enjoy the thoughts about it. Now, not all of us are going to be able to give today to support this platform, but all of us can think about generosity. And that could be really good for us. And where we find that place to give that generosity will be creative, and we can be creative about that. But don't deny yourself the capacity of thinking about generosity. I'd love to give. And what does that feel like? I want to give. I want to give to the world. I want to give to others. I want to not be trapped inside a self-focused view. I want to contribute. I want to give. And so the Buddha would say, do that. Think about it. Enjoy it. Allow it to expand. When you can, do acts of generosity and be really clear and present in those. And at other times, reflect on your acts of generosity. So there's a whole lot of thinking going on in there, right? and think about what it is that you've supported. Think about what it is that you've done. Reinforce the fact, if it did bring you any well-being and happiness, then that was helpful. That was the wise and sensible thing to do. And so this platform is offered on Dana, offered for our generosity, whatever that means, to find a place to give, to support. And we're all really grateful for the support that this brings. And yeah, I will be a recipient of that. Others through the Sangha Live platform will receive what they need to support their work and running this platform and all of the apparatus that goes on behind that. So I hope that was clear and in sync and all the rest. It's always a pleasure to be here with you. And if there are any questions around this theme or anything else that I've mentioned or anything else that's going on with your practice, really feel free to put them into the chat. And also to really feel invited that if you want to come on the screen, just put that also into the space. Okay, so we have a question from Chris. I'll do Chris first because we had one from Helen yesterday, although everything's welcome and I hope we'll get to everything. In terms of identification, non-identification, identification/non-identification, the not me, not mine attitude towards thinking of the Dharma teachings are intentional, volitional thought, such as with metta practice, etc., considered to be mine, where I choose to think in a healthy way, and the usual cloud of non-volitional dukkhaville thoughts we can't control. Okay, feel like I got a little bit lost in there. So there can be identification and non-identification towards thinking in Dharma teachings. And there can be volitional thoughts that we use, like metta practice, where we're actually saying, may you be happy, and the sense of self in those needs to be more prominent, and we kind of hold that view. So let's see if I respond to this, Chris, well enough. So the Buddha didn't say there's no self. Some teachers say there's no self, and I'm not quite sure why they do that, but some do. Some because they're not actually followers of the Buddha, they're followers of their own exploration of consciousness. They can't find a self, therefore they declare there isn't one. We have a sense of self in any moment where we have a sense of consciousness, which means we're having phenomena experiences. So the Buddha didn't declare there's no self. He said that there are ways of viewing the self which are dukkha leading, head us off to dukkhaville, as you point out. Metta is a utilization of a sense of self and a sense of another being having something that is there, that is them, that we can wish well to. And when we do that, we liberate ourselves out of entanglement. And so it's helpful. It's a skillful means in those regards. At other times, we actually want to look towards this body, this heart mind, these thoughts, these feelings, these sensations. So they're just happening. I don't need a self added onto that. And in fact, when there isn't so much self, there isn't so much dukkha. Very interesting. So metta practice is actually utilizing the framework of self and other, and actually inclining us towards a lighter, quieter sense of self. So sometimes there's an image in the teachings of like a snake eating its tail. And we could actually see that with metta practice, is metta practice uses the self to actually dissolve the self, dissolve the rigidity of the self. And it's actually the rigidity of the self and the rigidity of our experience having a self that is, the kind of the problematic aspects of self. So we could reframe the Dharma teachings not to be the liberation of suffering, but actually to be the liberation of unnecessary suffering. Yeah? In the same way, we could say that this isn't about getting free of oneself, but of actually having a freer self so that we can bring it into the world in ways which are wholesome, healthy, and creative. Because when there's a world, there is a self. These co-arise. The view of the world is dependent on the view of the self, and the view of the self is dependent on the view of the world. They need each other to behave this way. But the self that sees the possibility in the world for kindness is not the self that is, fearful and apprehensive and worried about the world in those fixed ways. So the possibility to move between identification, non-identification, and all of that is part of our skill. Part of our skill. Yeah. Let's see. Looks like thanks, Faith, for responding to that maybe more practical question. So Helen's reflection. So this is a reflection rather than a question. They're absolutely welcome. Thank you. That was really helpful. I think my disquiet in relation to this theme that I raised yesterday came from or with a mood of defensiveness. I'm making my intention for the week so to soften and relax the defenses. So important both for honesty and to listen with an open mind and heart. Yeah, lovely. Thanks for sharing that, Helen. And there's a lot of wisdom in what you're sharing there. And yeah, I think what you were sharing yesterday, as I recall it, was actually a sensible caution around the fact that if we talk about honesty, we associate that with saying what is true. And what you were expressing there was, well, what's true? What is ultimately and fundamentally true that I can then be honest about? And perhaps what we were saying yesterday, I think is true. It's like there isn't a lot that we can say with really clear conviction as a being that has senses that we know our senses are not the full range of life. Anyone who has a dog or interacts with other creatures realizes that there's vision in the infrared, there's sound that are way beyond too high and too low in pitch. There's energetics. There's all of these existence that we don't know about. So we can't say anything true about that. But that doesn't leave us kind of defenseless, and it doesn't leave us powerless, is perhaps what I meant more than defenseless, in that this world is conditioned. And when we start to understand the conditioning, for example, certain ways of thinking contract the being. We open out that spaciousness and we gift ourselves, a bit of freedom from the thought patterns that are contracting. So, really great reflection, really beautiful direction to take things in. And yeah, but I see there's another question, but it's now 8 o'clock, and I think it's probably best to keep to that rhythm. And what I'll do is I'll copy it down and we can bring it in tomorrow. So yeah, really thank you everyone for your presence and your attentiveness and your exploration, and yeah, wish you really well. So take care.